disoriented. I know I'm beside Leslie and Jimmy. I'm not here. It is. Sorry. Thank you.
I knew I picked up somebody's phone.
Yeah, it was minor arts. It's mine.
I already been through it. There's nothing.
Yeah. Don't look at any of the pictures.
I didn't know.
Oh gosh. Sounds like it. Seems like it. Only to the people who asked me. Actually, it was just one that actually showed up, so.
All right, well, we
We're
will.
going to probably put Kristen on the spot because if any questions anybody has, we're going to make her answer them. So.
All right, I'll call this public hearing to order. I'll read the rules of order for public hearing non-zoning matters. The mayor is the presiding officer. All remarks shall be addressed to the city council as a body, not to individual members. Anyone wishing to speak shall come to the microphone, give your name and address to the city clerk, limit remarks to 3 minutes unless further time is granted by council, not speak a second time until everyone wishing to speak has spoken once, and no one can speak more than twice. Please do not speak unless you have the microphone and have been recognized. With that, I'll call this is a public hearing in regards to HB 581.
Thank you, Mayor. As we discussed in December, HB 581 was passed by the Georgia legislature last year, and it went into effect on January 1st of this year. And so part of that, there are multiple things included in that bill pertaining to tax law changes, but the big primary topic that we're going to discuss is the floating homestead exemption. And that's the piece that we are required, if we want to consider at all opting out of that floating homestead exemption, we are required to hold 3 public hearings, very similar process to your annual millage setting process. And so that's why we are here today. I'm going to briefly go over the floating homestead exemption just to the best of my ability to try to give you guys an understanding of what that is and remind our folks who are watching online or in the audience of what it is, excuse me. And then we will open it up for the public hearing portion. And this is guidance that was provided by the Georgia Municipal Association. And so, like I said, the major components of House Bill 581 were the floating homestead exemption. There was a new local option sales tax that we're really not going to get into today, and some property tax code changes. Sorry, my computer is giving me notices. Excuse me. So the House Bill 581 implements a statewide floating homestead exemption for all counties, cities, and school boards. The floating homestead exemption is a special type of homestead exemption that is designed to offset or reduce increases in taxable value to the property. This is a little bit different than a tax freeze because there is a floating adjustment rate that is applied year over year off of that base year exemption. And so, for example, if 1 year the property tax value is $100,000 and then it increases to $110,000, the exemption would float the $10,000. And so the taxpayer would still pay the original base year exemption of, or would still pay the base year value of $100,000. So this homestead exemption is unique because the base year value is adjusted by an annual rate of inflation. The Department of Revenue has not actually told us what that rate will be and how they're going to calculate it. We believe it'll probably be CPI. And so in this situation, if you take the same property value of $100,000 for the taxable base year value and the CPI is 2%, and the base value is adjusted to $102,000, and then the exemption would float the $8,000 between the $102,000 base year value and the $110,000 new value. Homes first receiving the exemption in taxable year 2025, the base year value will be the 2024 assessed value rate. And then homes that receive it later on will be the year in which they have purchased their homes, or the preceding year, rather, of the valuation. And then, of course, if you sell your property, it will reset to the current market value rate of the property. Homeowners can't transfer the exemption to any new property. Further information on it. So The taxable value of the home may only increase at a rate of inflation each year. Again, that rate has not been determined. We don't know what the state's going to set that rate at. So this will essentially control how much the value of a home can increase annually. Homeowners can, who are already granted a homestead exemption, so all of our homesteaded properties in Chamblee will automatically, if you opt into this, will automatically receive the floating homestead exemption. This will not apply to commercial properties. So commercial properties will still increase at fair market value rate. The new floating homestead exemption is in addition to and not in lieu of existing homestead exemptions. So as you know, Chamblee has a general homestead exemption of $50,000 off of the assessed value of the property. So the first $50,000 of assessed value we exempt, and then you're taxed off of that remaining value. So this does not repeal or replace any existing homestead exemptions. This would be in addition to. If there is an existing local floating homestead exemption, which we do not have, the taxpayer would receive whichever of the two is most beneficial. This would also be true if a local floating homestead exemption was added in the future. So if we were to go and create our own local floating homestead exemption and we opted into this one, it would be whatever was more beneficial of the two to the taxpayers. And like I said, our existing general homestead exemption of $50,000 of assessed value would be added after the floating homestead exemption is calculated. So the state law, the way that it is written, this is your one opportunity to opt out. So in the future, if you opt in and you decide that you want to do something different, add your own different locally created homestead exemption, this one's not beneficial, whatever it is, you have no ability to opt out after March 1st, 2025. And so that's why we are going through these 3 public hearings in the event that you guys do ultimately decide to opt out. This is your one opportunity to do so. But this does not prohibit, if you do opt out, this does not prohibit you from creating future legislation that would allow for additional homestead exemptions. That would all just be local legislation. Did a little bit of a calculation, very rough. I know it's really hard to see, but this is kind of a rough calculation of a potential annual exemption impact. So starting in 2025, you're looking at anticipated possibly $80,000, but it goes up every year because it's a floating calculated amount to ultimately close to $500,000 in potential lost revenue in 2029. And so this is a rough calculation based off of a lot of estimates, but that is kind of how it would work. It would grow annually. That loss in potential revenue would grow annually because your valuation is remaining flat or it's growing at a much lower rate. And so that is my presentation. Correct.
Assume. So, with the assumption that the city has a number in its budget that it has to have, if you reduce the assessed value, you have to make it up in the millage rate if you're going to keep spending or expenses or whatever you want to call it the same, correct?
Correct.
So it's, okay.
So, but to be clear, this is our one opportunity to opt out.
Correct.
We can opt in later if we choose to do so.
No, you can't. It's kind of funny. You can't
Okay.
opt into the statewide floating homestead exemption, but you could adopt local legislation that mirrors it.
That mimics it.
Correct.
Okay, okay.
It's
So-
kind of weird like that.
Yeah, okay.
The other question I had is, I guess you even had it in one of your slides about the local option sales tax or whatever, that's not part of this discussion?
No,
Or it's part of the greater bill and it's going to be separate, or?
No, so the reason I'm not touching on the local option sales tax is because in order to, that one would work very much like SPLOST, but the county would have to agree to opt out of the floating, all of the cities and the county would all have to agree to opt out of the floating homestead exemption, which we already know that's probably not going to happen. Therefore, the additional offset that the bill attempts to kind of remediate for the local governments in this situation is through that local option, floating local option sales tax. That's basically just not on the table for us because all of the cities in DeKalb and DeKalb County are not all going to agree to opt out of the floating homestead exemption. And so that's why I didn't really touch on it because it's not going to pertain to us, most likely.
And it's separate from this vote on this particular section that we're talking about coming up?
if we move forward with opting in, for example, and every other city in DeKalb County and the county itself, or even if every other city opts in and DeKalb County opts out, we can't even discuss the floating sales tax. It has to be it only applies if all of the cities in the county opt out of the floating homestead exemption. Does that make sense? It's kind of weird.
It does. I'm just wondering, I mean, we already know that Dunwoody and Brookhaven are opting in, but I don't know about any of the status, like what's the read or what do the tea leaves say about the other cities or potentially county? Have you gotten any?
Yeah, so I know Decatur is holding public hearings to opt out. Avondale Estates is holding public hearings to opt out. Tucker is holding public hearings to opt out. Clarkston is holding public hearings to opt out. I don't know what I don't think anybody except for maybe Dunwoody and Brookhaven, which they have those tax freezes already in place that essentially nullify this. I don't think any of the other cities have actually made a final decision on it. They're all going through the process so that they can have those.
Brookhaven had indicated that they were going to opt in and then opted out, and then I think they realized that the political message, I guess, that the political message wasn't worth the aggravation, even though they knew they had their charter and all the other things as backup to that. Wasn't good. It seemed like it was symbolic, in other words. Probably going to get yelled at by our friends in Brookhaven.
Well, hopefully they're not. Hopefully they're not
verify any
watching,
of
right?
But that's,
Yeah, I know.
that's my opinion.
I know, and certainly in some of the newer cities, obviously Chamblee is one of the older cities in North DeKalb and in DeKalb in general, but it doesn't impact the newer cities as much because a lot of the newer cities actually have a tax freeze built into their charter. So Tucker does as well, and that's why they actually are opting out, from what I can see, or considering opting out because their freeze actually just is more beneficial to the taxpayer. So in their case, their freeze that's already existing is more beneficial, so they don't see any purpose of opting into it. At least that's what I understand. I could be completely off base on that, so hopefully they don't quote me. But and the other cities, I think they're all just considering their options.
And the county has to decide on this as well?
Yes, counties and the school boards. I do know that Decatur Schools is holding public hearings to opt out. I don't know if DeKalb County has posted their hearings yet or not. DeKalb County Schools, I'm sorry, has posted their hearings yet or not.
No. It seemed like this was created for counties that, in city situations where they're not, like literally we almost have 100% municipalization of our county, and it seems like it, but there's other places where the county's more dominant over the city or the city's more dominant over the county. It just depends. And it seems like that was created for more of those situations than it was for metro cities and counties.
Yeah.
That seems like to me.
Could be. All right, thank you, Kristen. And we'll open this up to public comment. If anyone wants to speak on this matter, remember this is a monologue, not a dialogue. We can't answer questions, but if you ask a question, we'll be glad to stick around after the meeting and try to get an answer for you. But if anyone wishes to speak on this subject, I will open it up to public comments. Remember, I'm not going to read this again because I just read it. But if you want to speak, come on up to the microphone, tell us who you are and what you want to say.
My name is Arthur Jabert. I'm a homeowner in the city of Chamblee and have been for 29 and a half years. And I love the city. I think we're doing good things with the tax money that we collect. And so I'm going to sum up right now what I think we should do about this particular bill. I think we should opt out. I don't hear big benefit to the city. I think that local auction sales tax might be a way of making up some of that revenue that you lose by giving tax exemptions to property owners. I think property owners, they feel pain when they pay their property taxes, but property taxes are based on the value of their property. And so they already had enough money to buy $1 million house maybe. I don't have a problem with that. That's great. Several of my neighbors are in that situation, but their property taxes are higher than mine ever were. But a sales tax is a regressive tax. It hurts people who have to spend most of their income on necessities. And property taxes, while they are a necessity, are also a sort of a result, or it's kind of a cost on accumulating wealth. It goes with the deal, and there are already many tax exemptions and benefits built into law, state, federal, county probably too, that benefit homeowners. I mean, if you own a home, you have a leg up already in the economy, and so that's great. I don't think we should change anything about our current taxation because we already have a good homestead exemption. I think most property owners may not understand that about 80% of their property taxes, last time I looked, went to the school board. I'd be surprised if the school board opted in or opted out. So I hope we can opt out without everybody else having to. But basically, I'm not going to get into my socialist rant, okay? And I know that you all have probably heard some of it or heard about it, but there is a saying that has been made popular maybe by some CEOs in the recent past: socialize costs, privatize profits. And so if you lower property taxes for homeowners, which isn't, as I say, necessarily a bad thing, but if you do that, you're socializing their cost. Then when they sell their property, they get to reap a whole bunch more money than they would have had if they'd had to pay tax all along. That's called privatizing profits. This is a sort of a standard angle in what I consider a kind of a current war on poverty, on poor. There's a sort of a never mind, that doesn't matter, but we already offer the homestead exemption. I don't want to get into all this Republican versus Democrat. I frankly don't think there's much difference in the two parties, but I hope we'll realize that the ones who want to opt in and get out of their sales tax, their property tax, are the ones with the wealthy homeowners. The big homes, a $3 million house carries a big price tag with your tax every year.
We're at 3 minutes, so if you can wrap it up, or we
Ma'am.
can extend.
Thank you very much for listening. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you, Art.
Well, thank you.
Appreciate it. So to be clear, that was someone in favor of opting out. Anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of opting out of this? Anyone?
It's just citizen comment. They can say
Yeah,
whatever they want.
Yeah, anyone?
There, I lived in Sexton Woods. I'm Bonnie Joubert, I live in Sexton Woods, and I want to opt out, and I will also speak for my neighbor across the street who has 2 kids going to Chamblee Middle School, and she wants to opt out too.
All right, thank you.
Well under 3 minutes.
Yes. Anyone else here wishing to speak on this matter? Opt in, opt out. We're here to listen. Here to learn, absolutely. Listen and learn. Okay, Kristen, anything else on this? Do we have executive session? I don't think we can with 2 people, can we? Might be fun, John. All right, with that, we will adjourn. Thank you all for being here.